This is a short video that I've put together to help go through some of the concepts in the Barry Bennett reading about classroom management. So classroom management is long and complex, and it's a skill that's best developed over a lifetime of experience with kids. So the more experience you get, the better. For those of you that do summer camps, you know what I'm talking about, or substitute teaching. Anytime you can get experience with kids, it will help you. Learning how to manage groups, putting them together, having clear rules, etc. A lot of classroom management happens even before we step into the classroom, which is why we insist on a really good lesson plan. If you've got a really interesting lesson that provides the kind of learning support children need and is creative and fun, you will find that you'll have a lot fewer issues in the classroom itself. That's why part A is about planning and preventing. But today we're not focusing on that. We're focusing on low-key interventions and dealing with conflict. So let's get started. So here are some of the approaches that I'm going to cover. Most of them are from Barry Bennett and Peter Smilanich's book, but I'm also going to talk about a couple of other things too, including your teaching persona. Just a reminder that the information about bumps and your reading from today was used and adapted from the book Classroom Management, A Thinking and Caring Approach. Now, apparently, Barry Bennett's put out an updated version of his classroom management book, so I encourage you to buy this one or anything else by Barry Bennett. It is wonderful, concrete, and a great way to help you problem solve. But before we talk about the bumps, let's talk about your teaching persona. I don't know if any of you have ever heard the expression, don't smile until Christmas. I don't believe in that. Full disclosure, I believe that you should smile as a teacher. But what this actually is trying to get at is the idea that if you're going to come into a classroom, especially as a new teacher, it's always better to go a little bit tougher than your natural impulses. It's a lot easier to come in tough and then ease up on your rules than it is to come in easy and toughen up later on, especially in the first few classes when you're starting to get established with your students and you're starting to have a relationship with them. They're gauging your reactions, they're gauging your limits and trying to figure out exactly how much they can get away with and where you've drawn the line. So the best piece of advice I can give to you here is draw the line a little bit tougher than what you would naturally be comfortable with, because then you'll have some room to wiggle later on. Okay. The other piece of advice, and this is from research and from my own personal experience, it really helps if you can put on your teaching persona. So who you are in the classroom is, yes, who you are in other spheres of your personal and professional life, but it's also very specific to who you are as a teacher. So as a society, we expect teachers to look and act and sound in a specific way. And if you can put on this role, act it out in the classroom, it will really help to establish you as the teacher in the eyes of your students. And that's why we make a big deal about you dressing up. Your students do expect you to look professional, and they get disappointed if you don't act like a professional for you. Also, so many of you are young and beautiful. If you want to create that necessary boundary between you and your students, it's a good idea to sort of dress up a bit and act like a teacher. I did this when I first started teaching. I think I graduated when I was 22 or 23, and I taught secondary 1, 2, and 3. So some of my students were 15 years old. The age difference is really not that much between 15 and 23. So I made a big deal about putting on the glasses, wearing suits, entering the classroom. It really helped me to sort of have confidence in myself. When I put on my teaching clothes, I felt like a teacher, I looked like a teacher, and I felt like I acted more like a teacher. And this is also true of your body language. And I don't know if we talked about this when we had actual face-to-face classes, but the way that you hold your body really also gives out messages. So your shoulders back, good posture, take up physical space in the classroom, own the classroom as you walk around it. believe it or not, the students will be reading your body language, whether or not they know it, just as much as anything that comes out of your mouth. Okay, so look and act and sound like a teacher. Okay, the other thing that we need to do, and this is where the rules come in, you need to decide what you're okay with and set your classroom rules accordingly. So what are your limits for behavior? What is it that you accept in your classroom that maybe might be different from somebody else? For example, when can students ask a question without raising their hands? Can they get up from their seat on their own, or do they need to ask your permission? Can they talk to a friend during class? If so, when? Under what circumstances? Is it okay for them to get a little loud? If they can get a little loud, when is it okay? Is it okay at the beginning of class, at the end of class, during group work? How loud is loud enough and how loud is too loud? Can they make a joke during class discussions? What kind of jokes can they set? So think about all these things. Think about the typical kinds of behavior in classrooms and figure out the ones that really disturb you or upset you, or you feel that would upset the running of your class, and try and frame your classroom rules around these behaviors. For example, I started off when I was a beginning teacher with a whole set of rules that I negotiated with the students, and we had them posted in the class. But I found as I gained more experience, the more rules I had, the more often there were exceptions to the rules and the harder it was to follow through. So as I ended up my teaching career towards the 10th year, I started off by saying, really, there are only 2 rules in my classroom. The first one was no chewing gum, because it drove me crazy that they chewed gum and stuck it under the desks. And the second one was respect. All behavior has to demonstrate respect for your peers and for me as a teacher in the classroom. And that was it. And once I had those 2 rules up, then I could be a little bit more flexible and point to the rules on the board and say, look, I'm following the rules that we set at the beginning of the year. Okay. This slide I love, because what happens when they break the rules? Well, I like to frame the breaking the rules as a choice. And this is a really great way of thinking about it. You can choose to follow the rules and have the kind of consequences and actions that follow from following the rules, or you can choose not to follow the rules. So for example, if a student came in class with a cell phone and cell phones weren't allowed, that was their choice, but they had to accept the consequence of possibly being caught and having their phone taken away. If they chose to talk too much to a person sitting next to them, I would remind them that this was a privilege and not a right. And if they chose again to continue the behavior, then they were moved because they'd then chosen not to sit next to the person. So try and frame your rules and consequences to breaking the rules as a choice, a behavioral choice. And Barry Bennett really advocates that. And this again stems from my deeper philosophy as a teacher and my beliefs, maybe not yours, but that as adults, when we move out and around in society, we have to stop blaming police and the laws and people around us for bad things that happen to us, and understand that we live together in a society and the actions that we have consequences. So if I choose to sleep in and not come to class, well then the consequences of that action are that I'm probably a little behind for that class. If I choose to forget to do my homework, or if I choose not to do my homework, well then the consequences of that are, I might not get as good a grade. These are all choices that we make, and they help students and adults later on to assume some responsibility. Okay, so what's kind of great about framing your rules in your class as choices is that you can do them for individuals, but also for class. And I did this a lot when I first started teaching. I often removed the fun factor as a natural consequence of the group's decisions. So what I would do is I would start by putting the agenda up on the board. And there was always an option where things could be done in a really fun way or in a really boring, kind of dull drill way. And the way I framed it for them is if they wasted too much time in class talking or fooling around or not getting in their teams in time or not picking up their materials and getting organized, we just wouldn't have time for the fun factor. It's a reward. So yeah, this is a typical example of an agenda on my board. It would be something like silent reading, class discussion on the topic of the day, some kind of cooperative game or activity or teamwork. And I would usually have something fun planned for the fourth, like, like a Kahoot or a team competition or something creative and fun. But if that didn't work, if they were screwing around too much during the teamwork, then it would be done individually. I would say, okay, you can't handle it today. Obviously, we're climbing the walls. We need to have some quiet, focused time. We're not going to do this as a game show quiz. We're going to do this as an individual quiz. Here are the questions, answer them individually on paper and hand them in. So that was not a lot of fun for them. And the trick here too is to follow through. I really want to do the game just as much as they did, but if you don't follow through when they're being annoying and terrible, then they won't believe you the next time. The other thing I used to do is take the last 5 minutes. I always finished class 5 minutes before the bell rang, made sure they had their homework written in the agenda, everything was tidied up, they were in their places. And in the last 5 minutes, we had something fun like jokes or silly cat videos. And if they really wasted their time, then they lost those jokes. Yeah, and they did some reflection writing instead, or something really awful or boring. So yeah, they looked forward to those times at the last part of class. And so to take that away was in itself a form of punishment. Okay, let's get into Barry Bennett and have a quick look at what he's talking about in the reading we did. So we're going to look at bumps 1 to 4, which are preventing and responding through things called low-key interventions. And he talks about a couple of things. The first one is the voice. The next one is the look. Stop, wait, and circulate. And this one is mine. It's called 1, 2, 3. So the voice and the look. So the voice, I'm going to say, what happens to teachers and most human beings when we get really nervous or stressed is instead of speaking normally, our voices get into a higher pitch and we speak more quickly. So for example, something like, okay guys, can you please sit down? I really need you to sit down and pay attention really quickly. We only have a few minutes left in class, so... Right? Does that sound familiar? We've all done it at some point. And in fact, what we need to do when we're starting to get stressed or upset by the behavior of the class and feel the need to go forward, we need to do the exact opposite. We need to slow down and lower the tone of our voice. And that's why we've got that lovely picture of Darth Vader. Okay. So instead of saying, okay guys, can you sit down? It would be something like, sit down now. You'll get a lot more respect from the students if you do it that way. Trust me. And an exercise I really like to do in class, which we can't do, is to close your eyes and to picture someone like that. And open your eyes. Imagine you're that person, open your eyes, look at the person who's causing a problem, and make eye contact. And my kids think this is hilarious because I call it the teacher look, but you can practice this. It's keeping your face and your mouth quite still so that you're not smiling, and opening your eyes just a little more widely than usual, and maybe even raising your eyebrows and looking across the room. Now you're at home watching this video, try it out, maybe look in the mirror and see. Okay, that's the look, the look. And if you really get good at this, you can quiet a kid down from across the room. The kid will know that you've caught them doing what they're not supposed to do, and you can look at them, pause for a minute, and then when they stop doing what they're not supposed to be doing, you nod and continue teaching. And usually that can be enough. That's one of the lowest forms, lowest bumps that you can use, the lowest key interventions. So the other thing you can do is the voice, right? So for example, that's enough. Okay. Barry Bennett talks a lot about proximity and touch. I call that stop, wait, and circulate. So, for example, it's for me the biggest problem is when students are talking and they should be listening and you're trying to get their attention so you can give instructions. So I'm constantly moving around the classroom, and when I'm giving instructions, I'll often pause in one place, look around, make sure they're quiet, and give instructions. If they're not, and a couple of kids are still off task and still having trouble getting focused and realizing that I need their attention, I'll stop and I'll wait. So for example, I'll say, okay, everybody put away your books. And at that point, there's a nice pause. Most of the class realizes that I haven't finished speaking and they start to go, uh-oh, something's up. Okay, I wait. Usually that's enough, but if it's not, I'll move closer to those who are still talking or distracted or on their phones or doing what it is that they shouldn't be doing. I'll give them a little look. And if they still haven't seen me, I'll move even closer and put my fingers on their desk, for example. And then I'll say thank you once they have complied, and continue. All right. So I talked earlier a little bit about behavior as a choice, and that students choose to respond and act in certain ways, and that behaviors in life entail consequences, right? So how does this actually play out in a classroom? Well, this is the hard part, but I think I found a way to make it simpler. There are 3 simple, but not easy, of course. They're simple steps to giving students choices. The very first thing you want to do when a student is misbehaving and you've tried your look, you've tried your proximity, you've tried your circulate, stop and wait, you've tried your voice, and you really need to address the problem in a conversation with the student, the first thing I would do is move over, crouch down next to the student. You don't want to be towering over them at that point. And make sure this conversation lasts as little time as possible because the student is going to be feeling stressed. And you really don't want to engage their fight or flight response, which you will if you are too close and too authoritarian for too long. So the first thing to do is to state the problem. Okay, so as I'm crouched down quietly, very quietly next to the student's desk, I'll say something like, when I'm giving instructions, I need everyone to be quiet so the whole class can hear what they need to do. Okay, and by the way, while I'm saying this, the rest of the class is usually really, really quiet, trying their best to eavesdrop into what I'm saying because they know something's going down. I don't need to shout this over across the class. It's a lot more effective if I do this quietly. Something else I could say, even shorter or even better, when someone talks while I'm giving instructions, it disrupts the class. For those of you who are working with students who are really weak in English, this is the time when it's totally cool to use French, in my humble opinion. Okay, and then finally, we have to tell them what they need to do. Okay, so I need you to stop talking to the people around you when I'm speaking. That's enough. Okay, so we've stated the problem. That's step 1. Step 2 is we're going to offer the choices and outline the consequences of each. Okay, so for example, a choice might be framed as something like this. Again, when I'm giving instructions, I need everyone to be quiet so the whole class can hear. I need you to stop talking to the people around you when I'm giving instructions. So here's the choice. You can choose to be quiet. You can choose to be quiet and stay where you are, or you can choose to keep talking and I'll move you to another place where you'll be less distracted. See how that works? They've chosen. The final thing, as I said, is to follow through, and that's the hard part. So hopefully, once you've said that, you've moved away very quickly. It's taken less than a minute to say it. You've gone back to teaching the class, the kids are moving around, and the kid is bothering again. You give them another look to say, really? And they keep going. So you come up to them, and at this point, you use as little language as possible. You're calm, you're respectful, but you're also firm. And you can say something like, I see you've chosen to keep talking. Please move to the back of the class or the front of the class or next to your desk, wherever it is. So please move to my desk over here. Please move over here. Okay. And that's usually enough. They might have a little bit of argument with you, but all you have to do is repeat again. This is what you've chosen. Please move. This is what you've chosen. Please move. Usually at that point, they give up. I'll talk about what happens if they don't in the next week. All right. At this point, I want you to stop the video and think about what you might say. And step 1, 2, 3, if a student, for example, is calling out disrespectful comments. So state the problem, state the behavior you want them to follow, and give them a choice. What would you say? What would you say if they keep getting up out of their chair and moving around the class without permission? State the problem, state the behavior you want to see, and give them a choice. Explain what will happen if they continue the behavior. What choice are they making? What would you do if a student kept rolling their eyes every time you said something to the class? Again, state the problem, state the consequences of continuing, and then you'd have to follow through. So hopefully this has illuminated most of what Bennett and Smilanich have been talking about in the first reading. But I wanted to conclude on a final and very powerful note, and this is something that Bennett and Smilanich also advocate pretty strongly. It's really important to catch them being good. As teachers, we do a lot of work correcting behavior that's disruptive. But often the kids who are acting out are the ones who don't receive positive feedback. So it can be really powerful when you give them some good positive feedback. So catch them being good at something or anything and give them warm, and this is really important, specific and sincere praise. A simple good job is nice, but it's not as effective as saying, you know what? I know how hard it is for you to sit still, but you did such a great job today. You stayed in your chair for almost the entire class and only got up when I gave permission. That's fantastic. Pretty specific and sincere. And if you want to be even more powerful, call their parents with the good news. As a parent myself, there's nothing we love more than being told our kids are amazing. And happiness at home is happiness for the child too. So that's really powerful. Yeah, there you go. So these are examples. It isn't easy to wait for someone else to finish speaking, but you did it. Well done. So yeah, I think that finishes up today for the bumps 1 to 4, and I'll put together another short video for how to defuse a power struggle. Thanks, everyone.